It was a brisk fall morning in Quantico, Virginia. The skies were clear, with the American flag fluttering boldly in the breeze outside the U.S. Marine Corps base. The base was buzzing with excitement not because of a drill or an incoming mission but because of a rare and unexpected visitor, Barron Trump, the youngest son of sitting U.S. President Donald J. Trump. At 6 feet 7 inches, Barron Trump towered over most adults, but despite his impressive height and quiet confidence, he had remained largely private, away from political drama, media frenzy, and public speeches. But at age 19, something in him had changed. Perhaps it was the deep conversations he'd had with veterans at the White House dinners, or maybe it was just his own desire to connect with the people who serve and protect the country. Whatever the reason, Barron had made a request to his father that surprised even the Secret Service. "Dad, I want to visit a military base. Not for a photo op. I want to be there. Eat what they eat. Talk to them. Understand." And that's how Barron Trump found himself inside the chow hall of one of the nation's most respected Marine Corps installations, dressed in plain cargo pants, boots, and a black U.S. Marines hoodie. No suit, no entourage, no formalities. Just a curious young man on a mission. Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado, a 10-year Marine with tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, had been assigned to guide Barron during the visit. She wasn't easily impressed, especially not by politicians or political families, but there was something different about this kid. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He took notes. After a morning walking through the training fields, weapons simulations, and barracks, it was time for what Barron had specifically asked for, a real MRE meal, ready to eat, the same rations soldiers ate during deployments. When Staff Sergeant Delgado handed him the brown plastic pouch labeled beef taco, Barron's eyes lit up. He read the contents like a student reading sacred text. "Is this really it?" he asked, fascinated. "Yup," Delgado smirked. A 5-star gourmet meal in the middle of a sandstorm. Barron chuckled, sat down cross-legged on a concrete step outside the field tent, and started tearing open the pack. There was no silverware, no napkin, no tray. Just heating packets, dry tortillas, a tiny bottle of Tabasco, a dessert bar, and a pouch of rehydrated beef filling. He tried to follow the instructions carefully, accidentally spilling a bit of water on his lap while activating the heating pack. "Not bad for a first-timer," joked a nearby corporal watching him. Barron smiled and took his first bite. The taco was warm but had a texture that most food critics would politely describe as challenging. But Barron didn't grimace. He just chewed thoughtfully. Then he looked up and asked, "Do you eat this 3 times a day when deployed?" "Sometimes 4, said Delgado. "Sometimes once. Depends on where you are." Barron paused. "And people complain about cafeteria food at college." For the next 45 minutes, Barron sat with a group of Marines around a folding table and listened to their stories, how one of them had to spend Christmas under enemy fire in Kandahar. How another missed his daughter's birth while stuck on a forward operating base in Syria. He didn't try to impress them. He didn't mention his father. He just listened. And then he did something no one expected. He stood up, picked up the leftover pouches, walked to the trash bin, and cleaned the table, not just his own, but everyone's. Delgado raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to do that." Barron looked at her and said something that would later go viral across every major social media platform. "If I can't clean up after a meal served to heroes, I don't deserve to sit among them." Silence followed. And then, one by one, Marines started to nod, some clapping lightly, others just smiling in respect. That simple moment, captured on the base's internal camera, would later be posted by Delgado herself with the caption, "This kid just gave us all a lesson in humility." The video would go on to receive over 50 million views in 2 days. But that was just the beginning. By the following morning, the video posted by Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado had ignited the internet. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic music or fancy editing. Just a young man, tall, quiet, and respectful, sitting with Marines, eating a meal ready to eat, and showing more humility than many had come to expect from Washington elites. The caption, "This kid just gave us all a lesson in humility," struck a nerve. News anchors across the political spectrum picked it up. On Fox News, the hosts praised Barron for leading by example. Even CNN, often critical of the Trump family, had a segment titled "Barron Trump Surprises Military with Unexpected Gesture." For once, it wasn't about politics, it was about character. That same afternoon, in the West Wing of the White House, President Donald Trump was handed a printed copy of Delgado's post by his chief of staff. The president leaned back in his chair, chuckled, and muttered, "That's my boy." But it wasn't just the video that was going viral. One Marine in the video, Corporal Terrell Dixon, had taken to X, formerly Twitter, and posted something even more personal. He didn't just eat with us. He asked about my little brother back home. And he gave me a contact to get my VA paperwork expedited. He may be the president's son, but today he was just one of us. Thousands of veterans replied. Many thanked Barron. Others shared their own frustrations with the VA, with the military's food system, with how service members are treated after returning home. Suddenly, a moment meant to be quiet and simple had grown into a nationwide conversation. But Barron, back in Washington, was unaware of the storm he had stirred. He had returned that night without any press conference, no announcement. When asked about the visit by a White House intern the next morning, he simply said, "I went to learn, not to be seen." But by day 3, staying under the radar was no longer an option. He was invited onto 60 Minutes. He declined. Fox News offered an exclusive sit-down interview. He politely said no. The Today Show even suggested a morning segment with military families. He replied with a note, "Please focus on the families themselves. Not me." Still, the story wouldn't die down. That week, thousands of Americans sent letters, yes, actual physical letters, to the White House addressed to Barron. They came from veterans, active duty members, teachers, pastors, and even high school students. One letter read, "My son is in the Marines. I watched that video in tears. You reminded me of who we are as a nation." Another simply said, "Thank you for showing our kids that dignity and respect still matter." Meanwhile, in military circles, discussions were sparked about MR equality, veteran support services, and mental health. What began as a spontaneous gesture now had real momentum. The Pentagon even announced a task force to review nutritional value in MREs, not because of a social media storm, they claimed, but because the voices of our servicemen and women matter. But Barron wasn't focused on viral fame or defense reform. He was back at the White House library, scribbling notes into a worn leather journal. When a Secret Service agent asked what he was writing, Barron replied, "A plan." "What kind of plan?" the agent asked. Barron looked up, his expression steady. "To do more than just eat with them. I want to change how we take care of them." Just days after the viral video lit up social media, Barron Trump quietly asked to meet with a small circle of advisors and veteran advocates in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. There were no press cameras, no public announcements, just a pad of notes, a few mugs of black coffee, and one determined 19-year-old with a vision. He began the meeting not with a speech, but with a question. Why do we act like honoring our troops is a one-day thing every November? The room fell silent. Barron opened his leather notebook and began flipping through pages he'd filled with handwritten notes, some observations, some statistics, and plenty of ideas. One caught everyone's attention. Operation Backbone, a grassroots military and veteran support initiative led by civilians, youth, and private sector leaders. It was a bold idea. Barron wasn't proposing a government program that would get lost in bureaucracy. He wanted to build something more agile, more personal, more connected. His vision was simple. First, partner with veteran-owned businesses to improve the quality of military meals. Second, connect college students and high schoolers with local veterans through mentorship programs. Third, raise private funding to cover gaps in transitional care for veterans re-entering civilian life. Housing, job training, and especially mental health. At first, some of the advisors were skeptical. "You want to launch a national program without any political title or authority?" one asked. Barron nodded. "Yes. Authority doesn't make things happen, relationships do." He wasn't naive. He knew his last name would draw attention for better or worse. But he also knew that if he focused the spotlight on others, on veterans, on volunteers, on forgotten stories, then the noise might finally give way to meaningful change. Later that week, with the quiet blessing of his father and the full support of First Lady Melania Trump, Barron launched Operation Backbone with a single video from the White House lawn. In it, he spoke plainly, with no teleprompter, no flashy editing, just raw honesty. "I ate a military meal because I wanted to understand. I listened to Marines who reminded me that service is sacrifice, not just ceremony. Today, I'm launching Operation Backbone, not as the president's son, but as an American who refuses to let our heroes feel forgotten. If you believe we owe them more than a thank you, then join me." The video was only 2 minutes long, but it struck a chord. By the end of the first day, over 200,000 people signed up to volunteer. Donations began pouring in. Not just from big names, though several CEOs did call, but from regular Americans. A retired mechanic from Indiana sent $10 with a note, "This is all I can give. But it's for the men I served with." A group of high school students in Texas sent a package with hand-drawn cards and a letter. We want to help clean up parks at the VA. Can we be part of Operation Backbone? Even former President George W. Bush sent a private message applauding Barron's effort and offering to connect him with veteran artists from his portrait series. It didn't take long before media outlets across the board began to refer to Barron Trump as the quiet force of change. Meanwhile, back at Quantico, Sergeant Delgado watched the movement grow from her barracks. Kid meant every word, she told her unit during chow. And for once, I think we've got someone who doesn't just want to talk about it. He wants to do something. 2 weeks after launching Operation Backbone, Barron Trump stood inside a dusty gymnasium in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, surrounded by folding tables, veterans in denim jackets, and volunteers wearing shirts that read, "We've got your six." The location wasn't random. Pittsburgh had one of the highest concentrations of undersupported veterans in the Midwest. It was ground zero for Barron's pilot program, a real-world trial of his 3-part mission, improving services, building connections, and bringing dignity back to those who served. On this day, the gym had been converted into a one-stop transition center. Veterans could get health screenings, legal advice, job placement assistance, and even fresh haircuts, courtesy of a local barber school that volunteered its entire class. Barron didn't just show up for a speech. He was there before dawn, setting up chairs, hauling cases of bottled water, and personally shaking hands with every veteran who walked in. One of them, a soft-spoken Navy vet named Ron Jacobs, approached him near the food table. "You Barron Trump?" "Yes, sir. I thought you were just another politician's kid trying to get headlines." Barron smiled. "I get that a lot." Ron nodded slowly. "Well, I've been coming here for years. Ain't seen anything like this before. First time someone asked me what I need instead of telling me what I should want." Barron just said, "That means we're doing something right." The moment was caught by a local news team and later aired on national television with the headline, "From MREs to a Movement, Barron Trump's Mission Grows." Meanwhile, back in Washington, Operation Backbone's ripple effect began to influence more than just public opinion. The Department of Veterans Affairs, initially quiet, released a statement. "We recognize and appreciate the efforts of citizen-led initiatives like Operation Backbone. Partnerships with private organizations will be crucial in our shared mission." And then came a surprise development. Congressman Marcus Alvarez, a Democrat and Marine veteran from California, requested a private meeting with Barron. Despite ideological differences with the Trump administration, Alvarez had been watching closely and he was impressed. Their meeting, held at a neutral veterans center in Baltimore, lasted over 2 hours. They talked about bureaucracy, outdated VA systems, suicide prevention, and the shame of homelessness among heroes. At the end of their conversation, Alvarez shook Barron's hand and said, "I don't care what party you're from. If you're serious about this, I'll help you push legislation." Barron's eyes widened. "I don't want a bill with my name on it. Just results." Alvarez nodded. "Then let's get to work." Within 3 weeks, the first Operation Backbone State chapter was established in Florida, Barron's home state. It was entirely volunteer-driven and supported by local businesses. Other states followed: Texas, Ohio, North Carolina, and even California. High schools formed backbone clubs where students wrote letters to active duty soldiers, helped elderly veterans with yard work, and visited VA hospitals. College ROTC programs partnered with local chapters to host town halls where veterans could speak directly with civilians about their experiences. In a culture increasingly divided by politics, Operation Backbone became a rare unifying force. Republicans saw it as patriotism in action. Democrats praised its grassroots, apolitical model. Independents loved that it wasn't run from behind a podium. And at the heart of it all was Barron, still wearing jeans, still refusing media interviews, still writing in that same leather journal. One entry, dated just a few nights before Christmas, read, "The meals may be ready to eat, but are we ready to act? They served us. It's our turn." It was a cold February evening in Washington, D.C., and the Capitol Rotunda was filled with lawmakers, service members, Gold Star families, and hundreds of young volunteers in navy blue Operation Backbone jackets. The occasion? A bipartisan event organized by the House Veterans Affairs Committee to recognize the impact of citizen-led veteran initiatives, and front and center was the quiet young man who had sparked it all. Barron Trump wasn't originally scheduled to speak. He had initially declined the offer, citing that the veterans deserved the spotlight. But after a unanimous request from both parties and at the urging of hundreds of Operation Backbone chapter leaders, he agreed to give brief remarks. He stepped up to the podium with no notes, no teleprompter, just that same calm demeanor America had come to respect. When I ate that MRE, he began, I thought I was tasting just a meal. But what I was really experiencing was a piece of someone's life, a life of sacrifice, service, and often silence. That meal opened my eyes and it lit a fire. He paused, scanning the room. Veterans in wheelchairs. Teenagers wiping away tears. Members of Congress sitting still for once, deeply focused. Our troops don't just fight on battlefields. They fight after the war. They fight for housing, for healthcare, for understanding. And too often, they fight alone. He shared stories like Sergeant Delgado from Quantico, who now led a backbone chapter of her own, offering job training to discharged female Marines. Like Ron Jacobs from Pittsburgh, who had become a local mentor for at-risk teens. Like the high schoolers in Boise, Idaho, who had fundraised to replace a crumbling roof on a Vietnam vet's home. This isn't just about veterans, Barron continued. It's about us. About the kind of country we want to be. Do we stand behind our words or just wave flags on holidays and forget the rest of the year? Then, with a steady voice that felt far older than his age, he ended. To every veteran listening tonight, you are not forgotten. You never will be. Operation Backbone exists because we still believe in honor, in service, and in the promise that when one American stands up, millions more can follow. He stepped back. The room stood. Not just polite applause. A full, sustained standing ovation from both sides of the aisle, from veterans with tears in their eyes, from Americans of every background. That moment was broadcast across every major network. Social media exploded again, but this time the message wasn't partisan. It was patriotic. Hashtag Barron Backbone trended on X, formerly Twitter, for 3 straight days. Even late-night comedians who typically mocked the Trump family said, whatever your politics, the kid did good. In the weeks that followed, Operation Backbone chapters expanded to all 50 states. A new bipartisan bill passed in Congress. Titled the Veteran Reintegration Act, modeled in part on Backbone's civilian-led initiatives. Schools and universities began offering credits for community service through Operation Backbone programs. A best-selling book called Meals, Missions, and Meaning, How a Simple Act Changed America was published, written by a team of veterans and youth volunteers, not Barron himself. And while America watched the next election cycle unfold with its usual noise and drama, something deeper had changed. Barron Trump had reminded the country that leadership isn't about a title or a microphone, it's about action. He never sought the spotlight, but he earned the respect of a nation, not because of his last name, but because of his first steps. And it all began with a single bite of a humble MRE.